Please put your mobile phones on the silent mode. Kindly also fill in the questionnaire for further development of the upcoming events. In the name of Almighty Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, peace be with all of you. On behalf of His Excellency, Dr. Jamal Sanad Swedi, Director General of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, I would like to welcome all of you this evening in a lecture entitled The Fate of Political Islam. It will be given by Dr. Mourad Wahba, Professor of Philosophy at Ain Shams University from the Arab Republic of Egypt. He is a member of a number of academies and international organizations. He enriched the Arabic library with several valuable books on philosophical studies. The Dr. Mourad Wahba is well known as the founder and chairman of Avarice Society, and his call for reviving the philosophy of Avarice in order to bridge the gap between the Western communities and the Muslim ones. And he stresses the importance of applying reason to understanding religious texts for the sake of positive dialogue between all peoples. Please, Dr. Mourad, the floor is yours. Please, Doctor. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our dear colleagues, it's an honor and a pleasure to meet and accept the invitation to give this lecture at this center, which is not a regional center. I do believe that it is playing an international role, since it focuses on modern issues, the foremost of which is the issue of terrorism. I'm very happy that the center has selected for me the title of today's topic, The Fate of Political Islam. Political Islam is a term, a modern term, that is given in Egypt to four Islamic groups: the Muslim Brotherhood, which was established in the year 1928, and then it was transformed from a local group into an international organization that controls nations and peoples all over the world. And the group of Saleh Sariya, which is so-called the Islamic Liberation Movement, and it executed the technical college attack in the year 1974, and the Disbelief and Hijrah group, which killed Sheikh Zahabi in the year 1977, and the Islamic Jihad group, which was responsible for the assassination of the late President Sadat. This terrorist group justified the assassination of President Sadat to the absent religious duty, or Al-Farid Al-Ghaiba, which was written by Engineer Muhammad Abdsalam Farj, and he was referring to the religious duty of jihad against despots who will never be removed, according to him, without using military force. And with the removal of those despots, the writer said, the Islamic State can be once again established, or impose the rule of Almighty Allah on earth, according to the opinions of the Muslim jurist Ibn Taymiyyah, who lived in the 13th century AD, and whose views are reflected in his fatwas, which were expressed by him. The book of the absent religious duty, or Al-Farid al-Ghaiba, is at the end of the day considered, that book is considered the constitution of those groups, and it was published before the assassination of the late President Sadat. It was published on the same year in which he was assassinated. I believe that the Muslim Brotherhood is the source of all those groups, and the three other terrorist groups are the branches of that movement. And therefore, we need to know and delve deeper into the reasons why this group was established. It was established by Hassan al-Banna. He graduated from Dar al-Uloom College in the year 1927, and on the following year, in the year 1928, he established the Muslim Brotherhood group, and the first members were 6 illiterate workers. And on the 6th of September 1945, he declared the main bylaws of Muslim Brotherhood and their life in general. The foremost items were absolute trust in their leadership and absolute obedience to the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood. And in this context, members of Muslim Brotherhood believe that Egypt has a unique role, since the reform of Egypt, as they say, should start by Islam, and therefore the revival of Islam requires the start to be from Egypt. And in both cases, the start or the revival, Egypt has to be the controlling authority for Muslims, and therefore in that case, according to their views, Egypt can be a strong Muslim state. As for the revival of Islam, it requires establishing an Islamic regime that means mainly implementation of the Islamic Sharia or jurisprudence, and ensuring that it is the governing authority for the community, and thereby the Islamic civilization itself, without these governing authority of Islamic Sharia, that Islamic civilization will be meaningless. That's why the Wilfred Cantwell, the famous theologian, says that the Sharia or jurisprudence is a theological aspect, and therefore it means implementing the verdicts and guidance of Allah. Yet the discrepancy here lies in the historical reference which was made by the American historian Richard Mitchell in his book entitled The Community of the Muslim Brotherhood, or the Society of Muslim Brothers, which was translated into Arabic. And in this context, I would like to put it between two brackets and to say something about Richard Mitchell. I was invited to I invited that writer to a conference that I held in Cairo entitled Islam and Civilization in the year 1979. And Richard Mitchell accepted my invitation and came and flew to Cairo and gave a research paper entitled Islam and Technological Values. He believes that Islamic groups, and particularly the Muslim Brotherhood, he believes that those groups take from the West the technology and impetus technology, from the values of civilization, so they would become only a means that those Islamic groups use for the destruction of modern civilization. And here the threats started to be made against Richard Mitchell. After the end of his research paper, and after he traveled to the USA, I asked them to send the research paper, because he asked me that to give him time to make some changes, but he was elusive back then, and he refused to send the research paper, and said in the conclusion, "Please forgive me, I am facing threats." And after that issue, he died without sending me a copy of that research. This is just a brief note that I would like to mention between brackets. What did Richard Mitchell say in his book? There's an amazing reference that he made in this book, and he said the need for the Eastern Orthodox to be fully committed in the implementation of the Islamic Sharia or Islamic jurisprudence in the Muslim community. And this means that the Orthodox Church in Egypt has to disagree, or to be in disagreement with the Western Protestant Church, and considers that the Protestant theology is a sort of atheism, and the Orthodox Church is moving in that direction. The discrepancy here is that the Christian Orthodox Church is committed to the political Islam's trend in combating the West. Therefore, there was this hegemony between the leaderships of, or the leaders of Muslim Brotherhood and the Orthodox Church, particularly in the time of the Pope Shenouda III and the former President Hosni Mubarak. There is historic reference in this regard. This is not only about the integration, or let's say the alignment between the Orthodox Church and Muslim Brotherhood. This trend in terms of hatred for the West was extended even to the Asian communities, including Africa. And in this context, and in all of this context, the Muslim Brotherhood called for establishing a Muslim bloc composed from Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indonesia, and the 5 Muslim republics which are adjacent to Russia. And they would be committed to the implementation of the Sharia on Muslims and Christians without any discrimination. I have seen this escalating union between them in Africa and in Asia, and the alignment between Christians and Muslims and other religions, when I established an establishment entitled the Philosophical Society, the Afro-Asian Philosophical Society. And based on all of that, we can say that the joint factors or the common elements between Muslim Brotherhoods and the other 3 Islamic groups is the focus on establishing an Islamic government that is based on the Holy Quran and Sunnah to restore Islamic Caliphate, which is considered an Islamic duty and which was eradicated by Kemal Ataturk in the year 1923 for the establishment of a secular state. Therefore, those four groups which were established in Egypt and which I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture, they are an extension of the Ottoman Empire. And the Egyptian people did not perceive of the Ottoman Empire's authority as a sort of a foreign ruler. They considered those the representatives of the Ottoman Empire as a sultan of Islam or a sultan of Muslims. So, and therefore, we can say that the Ottoman state was the grand state of Islam. And the beginning of this hypothesis was in the year 1517. And that year is the year in which Egypt was invaded and the Mamluks regime were toppled. Therefore, the critical analysis of political Islam makes it necessary to conduct this analysis under the concept of analyzing Islamic caliphate and secular state in Turkey, in modern day Turkey. And the struggle here is at two levels. An internal struggle in Turkey now between President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his followers Muslim radicals and the remaining scattered secularists on the one hand, and an external struggle between Turkey supported by Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas and Qatar and Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan on the one hand, and all the other Muslim states on the other hand, in the GCC states alongside Western countries on the other hand. Since this struggle is attributed to the Muslim Brotherhood group, which is the main proponent of political Islam, this group, the Muslim Brotherhood, should be the focal point and the main point and center of today's lecture. And in this context, I would like to refer to the fact that this group, the Muslim Brotherhood group, has become highly active and played an active role in the Palestinian war in the year 1948. And with the breakout of the July Revolution, this group was aligned with the free officers. The free officers in Egypt, in the military in Egypt back then, were members of the Muslim Brotherhood back then. And in this context, I would like also to refer to what President Abdel Nasser decided. He decided to develop Al-Azhar to be able to conduct its religious rule to the best possible level. And to achieve this objective, the late President Abdel Nasser established in the year 1961 the Islamic Conference and the Islamic Council, and gave them the mechanisms of how to promote religious thought. So it would be the thought of an approach adopted by the elites and the public. And here, once again, I would like to open another brackets. The struggle, and I've seen it firsthand with my own eyes. The struggle between Abdel Nasser and the Muslim Brotherhood was not a religious struggle at all. It was a struggle over power only. And therefore, Abdel Nasser unconsciously was aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood at the religious level, to the extent that the groups of the Muslim Brotherhood during the reign of Abdel Nasser invaded the scope of education and the sphere of education and controlled education completely. And in the year 1970, before the death of Abdel Nasser, almost 6 months before the death of Abdel Nasser, he asked me to be his secret advisor in the field of education. And I had an office at the president's office, at the president's headquarters. I was prohibited from meeting anyone. I was the secret advisor. I would receive documents from Abdel Nasser and express my opinion without contacting anyone. This reveals the internal struggles back then. From this perspective, this was not really far from the hidden impact of the Ottoman state in during the reign of Muhammad Ali's dynasty. The Muhammad Ali dynasty in Egypt was an extension of the Ottoman state, and therefore I do not recognize Muhammad Ali as the founder of modern day Egypt. He was merely an extension of the Ottoman state and completely opposed to the West. Therefore, the Muslim Brotherhood also had the opportunity to align themselves with the leftist groups. They deceived the leftist groups by putting up some slogans that would deceive them, such as cancellation of the emergency or state of emergency laws. Both of them, Muslim Brotherhood and leftists, agreed. Condemnation of arrests and detention, as if it was coming from the belief of freedom of speech, the freedom of establishing political parties, to ensure that the Muslim Brotherhood would have its own political party, which would be supported by the leftists in Egypt. And this was the discrepancy. On the 24th of January in the year 1954, the revolution's leadership council issued a decree by considering Muslim Brotherhood a political party. And more than that, the Muslim Brotherhood focused on embracing the leftist movement in Egypt, and they succeeded completely in embracing and supporting the leftist movement and socialist movement in Egypt. The Tajammu political party was composed from communists, socialists, Muslim Brotherhood, who were considered the leftist movement of Muslim Brotherhood, and the communists and the nationalists. Those were the four components of a Tajammu political party. Back then, I was informed, or I was prohibited from joining that political party because the percentage did not allow this. But of course, this was just a pretext for ejecting me as a member of Tajammu political party and denying me access to that political party. Therefore, the Committee for Defending National Culture was established at Tajammu political party, and that committee was actually moved by the Muslim Brotherhood members from within a Tajammu political party. And when it was established after signing the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel in the year 1979. The objective of establishing that committee for defending national culture was to combat normalization of relations and combating any agreement with Israel after after the signing of the peace treaty, and considering anyone who supports the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, considering such people as traitors. And that trend is still active up till now. And it prohibits and limits any attempt in this direction. Okay. In the year 1988, ten years after signing that agreement, the Committee for Defending National Culture conducted a forum about the sectarian problem in Egypt, which is a struggle between Muslims and Orthodox and so on. And it was really held in the year 1987. Well, it is really worth mentioning in this context that this was the beginning of paying attention to the so-called religious fundamentalism, because the beginning was with the Muslim Brotherhood, and then the fundamentalism spread in all other religions under the title of religious fundamentalist movements. And this fundamentalist movement in all religions are fighting each other. This fight came to the surface in the year 1988. I conducted an international forum in Brighton in the UK under the title Fundamentalism and Secularism in the Middle East. In the same year, in the year 1988, the American Academy for Sciences and Arts granted a $2.5 million grant to Chicago University to study religious fundamentalist movements worldwide, and issued 5 major volumes within 5 years. However, the odd thing in that context is that despite the issuance and printing of those large volumes of books and references about religious fundamentalism, educated people disregarded all of them all over the planet. Nobody talked about those studies in any country. It was never touched upon by elites anywhere. This is a sort of concealing the issue to ensure that the strength of the Muslim Brotherhood comes to the surface. I'll take you one step back again. In the crisis of March 1954, the opinion back then was that democracy was in danger because of the trends adopted, the despotic trends of Abdel Nasser. This is what was said back then. In confronting the president of Egypt back then, Mohammed Naguib, who was supported by the cavalry in the Egyptian army. And this call for resisting Abdel Nasser and siding with Mohammed Naguib, this call was headed by Judge Abdel Rashid Sanhouri, who was back then the head of the State Council. The judge who presides the State Council declared that the cause of the 1954 crisis was putting an end to dictatorship, and this was not true by Sanhouri. I'll tell you why this was not true, and Sanhouri was not true about that, because Abdel Razak Sanhouri, his PhD thesis in the Sorbonne University in the 1928 was about the Islamic Caliphate and the call for reviving Islamic Caliphate. And therefore, after reading that message, I became convinced that Issanhoui, in his violent fight against Abdel Nasser, was not based on democracy, but because of rejecting the concept of Islamic Caliphate was rejected by Abdel Nasser. It is also noteworthy that the Afro-Asian Philosophical Society, which I established in the year 1979, when I was in Pakistan, in the year 1975, I was invited by the Philosophical Conference in Pakistan in the year 1975, and I was hesitant to go to Pakistan because Pakistan was a Muslim state, and he believes in secularist values. So I was hesitant to support this call. The ambassador of Pakistan met me actually back then and asked me not to be hesitant. He told me not to be hesitant because there are two kinds of states. A state where the constitution stipulates that religion is the way of life, however it adopts a secular way of life, and other states where the constitution does not base constitution on the religion, but its way of life is a secular one. And Pakistan adopts the first model as a secular state which has a constitution that supports Islam, but their approach was secular. So in that case, I decided to go. I had a fight, or let's say a controversial dispute with the prominent professors back then in Pakistan, but we decided to establish the Afro-Asian Philosophical Society back then. I was asked to head it, to be the chairman of that society, and the first conference for that society was held in Cairo in the year 1978. In this lecture, I'm talking about the outcome. Later on, I'll tell you about the outcome of this Afro-Asian society, which was completely eradicated and erased in the International Philosophical Societies Association. And our society was a member of that association as of the year 1988. However, the conspiracies that we faced within the International Philosophical Societies Association led to the eradication of that society in a conference in which we held in Bombay, in India, in the year 2010. And then the Afro-Asian Philosophical Society disappeared because of the violence of the Muslim Brotherhood, which acts in all establishments in a very secretive manner. And also out of the alignment between Christians and Muslims, I would like to highlight the following points. Since the year 1935, the Muslim Brotherhood has been trying to introduce the subject of religion as a key subject in schools to confront the teaching of Christianity in the missionary schools. I would like to add that in Bahmdoun Conference in Lebanon, which was held in the year 1954, both Saeed Ramadan and the Father Samuel, the bishop of the Orthodox Church back then, agreed upon introducing the subject of religion as a subject, the main subject in government schools. However, the Muslim Brotherhood did not stop at this point. They managed to control the colleges of education in Egypt, which are 28 colleges. which graduate annually 200,000 teachers. 200,000 teachers graduate from those colleges, and they become Muslim Brotherhood members. And in their return, at schools, they transform students into members of the Muslim Brotherhood. And therefore, we had that disaster. This is a brief about political Islam. And of course, now we want to talk about the fate of political Islam, which was the title of this lecture. In the year 2002, a book was issued by the French thinker Jules Couppel, a professor of sociology and political sciences, who is a specialist in political Islam. And in modern day Arab world, the book title was Jihad, and the subtitle was The Remnants of Political Islam. The first line in the book reads that highlighting that the attacks of 9/11, in 2001, he said that those events are taking place for those attacks are taking place for the first time in the history of the USA, which destabilized the belief that the American civilization will be the ruling civilization of the 20th century. The discrepancy here is that the USA was the country that pushed Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of those attacks, to attack the atheist Soviets or the secularist Soviets in collaboration with the fundamentalist regime of Taliban in Afghanistan. Yet Osama bin Laden himself was the one who said that Allah blessed the Islamic group that will destroy America. All of this was with the help and assistance of the USA. Once again, the question is, what happened to political Islam since it was started to appear in the year 1928 and up till now? There were accumulations that need to be clarified. In the year 1970, the Islamic Arafah party was established in Turkey. And in the year 1970, Khomeini called upon the Iranians to revolt, to topple Shah and establish an Islamic regime. The third event in the year 1970, in the year 1970. In the year 1970, the massacre of Black July took place, which was conducted by King Hussein against the Palestinians in Jordan. And on that year, the year 1970 also, Abdel Nasser died, and with him the Arab nationalist movement dissipated alongside Arab unity. And the Muslim Brotherhood was the alternative. And therefore, the rise of political Islam began in the Muslim world. And in the year 1979, it was declared in Iran that the Shah will be driven out of Iran, and the establishment of the Islamic regime. In the 30th of January in the year 1997, I participated in a Louisiana dialogue in Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. And it was a coalition between Egyptians, Jordanians, and Israelis, and Palestinians to establish an international coalition for the Arab-Israeli peace movement. It was known in the media as the Copenhagen Declaration. what happened in that conference. It was a 2-day conference. On the second day of the conference, the declaration was made. I asked for a speech to comment on the statement made by the declaration or made in that conference. And in my words, I said that if the Middle East now is governed by three religious fundamentalism: a Jewish fundamentalism, a Christian fundamentalism, and an Islamic fundamentalism. And those three fundamentalist movements are antagonists of one another. And one of them has to eradicate the others. Why? Because every religious fundamentalist movement believes that it has the absolute truth. And I have a book which was entitled "The Owners of the Absolute Truth." It's an analysis of what is happening now at the international level or Earth's level. The real struggle is a struggle between fundamentalist movements, and in the Middle East between three fundamentalist movements. And therefore I added another point. If we want to achieve peace in the Middle East, we need to establish a secular movement that would stand against those fundamentalist movements, because the secularist movement, since it thinks of relative or in relative terms, it is ready to make concessions. It is ready to make or conduct negotiations for peace, because any negotiations require some sort of concessions, and you cannot make concessions in negotiations while you are a fundamentalist. You need to be a secularist. This was my own viewpoint, which I expressed in the Copenhagen conference. I was surprised that two, one from Hamas and one from the Likud party, both of them criticized me viciously. And they asked for reconsidering the statement to ensure that they would input religious terms, more religious terms, as a resistance of the secularist movement or the secularist idea that I expressed. After that, I remained silent. And I'm still silent in the face of this violent attack. In the year 2011, the revolution of the 25th of January started. 3 days after the start of the revolution, the Muslim Brotherhood took control of the revolution, and young people were excluded, and they pushed young people for a confrontation with the army, while secretly they said to the army, "We support you." And afterwards we had the 2012 coup under the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Egypt was ruled for 1 year by the Muslim Brotherhood. After the 25th of January revolution, with 3 days after the breakout of the revolution. Another discrepancy here is that when the Egyptian people conducted the referendum on the constitution in March 2011, the call made by the Muslim Brotherhood was, those who approve of the constitution will enter paradise, and those who will object to the constitution will enter hellfire. And therefore the constitution was approved and supported by the Egyptian people. Now, the pivotal question is how to resist. how to resist the Muslim Brotherhood movement, which crept into all the institutions of the entire planet. In America and in the White House, in the time of Obama, six advisors who supported the Muslim Brotherhood were advisors to Obama and moving and shifting the American foreign policy. I believe that it is necessary to establish three movements: the secularist movement, and what I call the Arab rationalism, and enlightenment. I will tell you about those trends which I like to establish. Why secularism? Because secularism resists fundamentalism. Secularism is thinking in relative terms and not in absolute terms. Do not exclude the absolute, but do not make it part of civil status or civil issues. The Avarice School I attributed to Avarice. Avarice is a famous Muslim scholar who lived in the 13th century. Avarice. What happened to Avarice? His books were burnt to the ground. In the Muslim world, he was accused of being an atheist, and he was sent into exile at the end of the 10th century because he died in the year 1198. And with the beginning of the 13th century in Europe, Frederick II issued a decree. Back then he was the ruler. He issued a decree to translate all the writings and books of Avarice and to promote them. And when he was asked, why did he do that? Because his advisors told him that if you want to resist and to get rid of the federal system, which is supported by the church in Europe, you need to use the ideas of Avarice. And therefore, all his books were established. Avarism, Latin Avarism, was established in Europe. Back then, Europe used to speak in Latin. Now I want to focus on Avarice books once again from the 12th century to the 21st century. And since he speaks Arabic, or his books are in Arabic, we would have it as Arabic Avarism. As for enlightenment, enlightenment is important, in my opinion, because that the only thing that controls human mind is the mind itself. Nothing controls the mind except with the mind itself. It is aligned with Arabic Avarism and enlightenment. This way we can get rid of Islamic fundamentalism. If we don't do that, Islamic fundamentalism will continue to exist, will continue to be violent, and will continue to be a threat to all the countries of the earth. And I would like to thank all of you for being patient and listening to me carefully, and I apologize for taking too much time. Would like to thank Dr. Mourad for this valuable lecture. Now we'll open the floor to questions. Please, if you'd like to ask a question, please introduce yourself and make your comment clear and brief. Please. First, I would like to thank you very much. My name is Sliman from Palestine. My question is brief, very brief. My question is brief. Do you believe, Doctor, what is the relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and the subsequent organizations with international... Your Excellency, wants to know the relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and Zionism. I attribute Zionism to fundamentalism, to Jewish fundamentalism, because Jewish fundamentalism is the movement that wants to restore all of the past Jewish history in a way that enables it to be at the very core of human civilization. The Muslim Brotherhood, their cause also is not being part of human civilization, but destroying human civilization for the sake of re-establishing it under the umbrella of the Islamic Caliphate. So, two very clear points have to be clear. Two important points have to be clear. The Jews wants to be part of civilization. The Muslim Brotherhood wants to destroy civilization. This is the difference between the two. Another intervention. Please write down the question. Peace be with you. I would like to thank you, Excellency Professor, for your intellectual effort for the political or for clarification of political trend in Islam. I would like to highlight a very malicious issue, a descriptive malicious issue, which produced a lie that merged between fighting and jihad. In the Holy Quran and the Sunnah, fighting is one thing and jihad is another. This concept was highlighted by jurists, and where this was refuted by philosophers and thinkers. What I call for is to discriminate between fighting and jihad. This is the first part of the question. Please give me a direct question. Please give me the direct question. I asked him about the differentiating between fighting and jihad. Fighting is a physical aspect of defense and attack, and jihad is purification of human soul, and this is in the Holy Quran and Sunnah, and for thinkers and philosophers. People have been believe that fighting and jihad are one and the same, and the same applies to Muslim young people. How can we invalidate this malicious intermingling of the two concepts among young people? What you want is to differentiate between fighting and jihad. Fighting is defense, and jihad is purification of the soul. People have intermingled the two concepts, and we need to differentiate between them. I will take the two terms here. Fighting for defense, and jihad as purification of the soul. Neither this nor that are present now, and Your Excellency is asking for they have to be present. This differentiating between those two concepts should be made to get rid of terrorism. How can we transform this concept into a trend? This is what matters the most. I continuously say that ideas remain worthless unless they turn into a trend. The Muslim Brotherhood represent a trend. They are not just an idea. The disaster or the tragedy The tragedy in the Muslim world is that ideas like Your Excellency do exist, but they have never been transformed into a trend. And therefore the Muslim Brotherhood continues to remain without any resistance. Nobody is resisting them. This is the problem issue. What did Hassan al-Banna do? He used 6 illiterate people, a mechanic and a shoemaker. He just sat with them. What did he do with them? He established accumulation of his thought. We, in combating or resisting the Muslim Brotherhood, we are not accumulating any concepts. And therefore, Your Excellency's concepts do exist, but they don't have a major impact because they have never been introduced as a trend. I believe, and I'm with you here at this center, that we should agree on what are the concepts that may turn into a trend, so we would be able to get rid of terrorism. My proposal is establishing those 3 trends. Can Your Excellency's idea be integrated into those 3 trends, to be integrated in secularism and Arabic Avarism and enlightenment? I believe that the differences that Your Excellency has highlighted has a foundation for highlighted by Avarice, because the greatness of Avarice is that he differentiated between many terms, among which this one. For example, Avarice said, if we find some among some people who are not Muslims, we find good ideas among them, we can adopt them. If we see that they have bad ideas, we should discard them. He was talking about the Greek philosophy, because Abu Hamid al-Ghazali in the 11th century established a book which criticized philosophers. The first paragraph in the book: Muslim philosophers are disbelievers because they were influenced by the Greek philosophy, which is based on idolatry. He said that this is completely rejected. So we will take what Your Excellency said. We will differentiate between legitimate jihad and illegitimate jihad, and legitimate fighting and illegitimate fighting. There is a trend of ideas like Arabic Avarism and secularism as part and enlightenment. Please, thank you. Please allow us, we don't have much time left. In conclusion of this lecture, I would like, in the name of His Excellency Professor Jamal Sanad Suwaidi, the Director General of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, I would like to thank all of you, and would like to thank Dr. Mourad Wahba, and thank all of you, our dear guests, and we hope to meet you in upcoming lectures. Thank you, and peace be with all of you.